Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. My name is Cameron Lawrence, and today we are talking 8 must-start players for Week 12. And I know what you're thinking if you've seen our channel before. Cameron, you don't do must-starts. Lucas does, and he does them on Friday. Well, with Thanksgiving coming up, we made a little switcheroo. We figured must-starts are more important with only 3 games left than trade targets are right now, with some trade deadlines already passing. So we made that pivot. But don't worry, next week we'll be back to our regular scheduled content with waivers with Ty, must-starts on Friday with Lucas. I will have something new coming up on Wednesdays, and we got our 2 podcasts. So what that means is you need to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single chance to get better. But we're not going to waste any more time, and we're going to dive right in. And our first must-start player is Michael Pittman, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts. He is playing against the Buccaneers this week, who are giving up more receiving yards than anyone over the last 4 weeks. And when you got a guy like Pittman, who is seeing a ton of volume, it's an obvious start. Pittman has seen 8 receptions in each of his last 3 games. In Week 7, he had a down week, but then the week before, in Week 6, he had seen 12 targets. So it's constant targets, constant volume. And when you got a team now that's been extremely leaky like the Bucs, that yardage is going to come with it as well. And we could easily see a touchdown this week for Michael Pittman against the Bucs. So you need to make sure that Michael Pittman is locked into your lineup this week. And honestly, I think it makes Josh Downs a pretty good start as well. I'm more confident, obviously, in Michael Pittman, and I think that's been, something that we've seen consistently. But Josh Downs is also a very good start against this Bucs defense, who's good against the run, which is what the Colts want to do more, but they've been terrible against the pass. Next, we have Jerome Ford, and he's playing a team who's been very good against the pass in Denver, but terrible against the run. Last week, he didn't look great on the ground. And let's be honest, nobody on either offensive side of Pittsburgh or Cleveland looked good doing anything at all. It was a 13-10 game. It was disgusting. He did salvage his fantasy week with a touchdown, scoring double-digit points again. He has double-digit points in all but 2 games since taking over. So just gives you a great floor to have from your running back 2, maybe even your flex position. And this Denver team has struggled all year against the run. Obviously, they had that mighty struggle against the Dolphins where they gave up 70 points. Achane and Mostert putting up huge rushing days. But they struggled last week against Alexander Mattison and Ty Chandler. That is not a duo that teams should be struggling against. And they didn't really slow them down. They did cause a fumble against Mattison. But Chandler and Mattison combined for almost 150 rushing yards. Ford is still the lead back in this team. He's still going to consistently get carries over Kareem Hunt. Last week he saw 49% of carries, but that has more to do with how the game was going. And so they're going to continue to lean on the run with, like I said, against a stingy pass offense in Denver with DTR starting. So Jerome Ford should be in for tons of volume. You can see 18-plus carries this week and good efficiency on the ground against this defense. Our next start, we're going to go back to the wide receiver position, and it's Marquise Brown. And I know, if you have Marquise Brown, you're like, why the heck would I start him? 3 catches, 46 yards over the last 2 weeks with Kyler Murray. I want nothing to do with this guy. I was promised it'd get better when Kyler came back, and it's just been worse. It's been terrible. Guys, I don't want to keep harping on it, but we got to remember, last year, in the first 6 weeks without D-Hop, he was the wide receiver 6. So there is chemistry between Kyler and Marquise Brown. These two know how to work together. Kyler knows how to find him. And that's going to come back. But obviously, this is Kyler's first live games, live snaps, since week 14 last year, these last 2 games. So those are going to come back. They're playing the Rams, who have been struggling against the pass over the last 4 weeks. I've been talking about last 4 weeks a lot. We love talking about trends for defenses, right? We saw that last year with Detroit. First half of the year, they were terrible. The worst team, best team to run against. And then the second half of the year, they started to turn it around. So if we kept assuming that they were bad all year long, it kind of started to bite us in the butt. So that's why we're talking 4 weeks when we talk about defense. And the Rams have been struggling. And so this is the perfect get-right game. The Rams are allowing the 6th most receiving yards to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. So Marquise Brown in an offense where he's the number 1 weapon. I know Trey McBride's been great, but Kyler should be looking his way in a game where against a team that is going to struggle in a divisional matchup that, Kyler wants to come out and win. Kyler wants to win. Kyler wants to show that he's either going to be the team of this, or the quarterback of this team or the quarterback of some other team in the future. So he wants to go out and put up big games. We're going to stick with the wide receiver position, and we're going to go with Diontae Johnson. Last week was ugly, but he still saw 8 targets. Last 2 weeks have been ugly, but he still saw 8 targets. And I know some of you are singing it. Some of you know it. Some of you are so happy about it, so especially you Pittsburgh fans. Matt Canada has been fired. This offense is going to change a little bit. Probably get a little bit more aggressive. Probably call some plays farther down the field. Make sure they're incorporating these wide receivers more. I don't think it's going to change completely. It's not going to 180 and they're all going to suddenly be an amazing pass attack. But I do think that Pickens and Diontae are going to be way more involved this week since he is allowing up the 4th most yards to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And if we're honest, this next stretch for Pickett is going to be pretty make it or break it. It's going to really show. Was it Pickett that was a problem? Was it Canada? Maybe it was both. But was it just Matt Canada was a problem and Pickett can overcome now that he's got other coordinators? Or was Pickett really a big part of the problem? So I would look to see them trying to stretch the field a little bit more, trying to find things across the middle. Hopefully, for once, it's the weirdest thing we've ever seen, them not throwing the ball over the middle of the field. But I would look for Diontae to see a bounce-back week, especially after expressing frustrations on the sideline. We know that sometimes does work out pretty well for these wide receivers in the next week. We're going to go to our first quarterback right now with Trevor Lawrence, who finally bounced back last week with 4 total touchdowns. This whole offense is way better with Zay Jones in the lineup, and I think they just continue to show that Ridley is better. The running attack, it wasn't great, but it can get better, and obviously T-Law is better when he has his full amount of weapons in this lineup. And now they're playing against Houston, who has allowed teams to stay in games. Arizona, Cincy had a good game against them. And this C.J. Stroud-led offense is absolutely cooking. So we could see a huge shootout game this week down in, I think they're playing in Houston. So we know what T-Law's capable of. We saw it last year. Showed us a glimpse of it this year with 4 touchdowns. And now he's got to play another high-scoring offense. I think T-Law needs to be locked in to your lineup this week. We're going to also go to our first tight end now, and it's Dalton Kincaid. And I know this one might be a little bit of cheating because I feel like he is always a must-start as of right now. He had his first game under 15 PPR fantasy points since week 6, since Dawson Knox went out. But he still had 7 targets, 6 receptions, and 46 yards. This Bills offense looked good in their first game without Ken Dorsey. And Philly has been getting cooked. They're playing the Eagles, has been getting cooked by tight ends as of late. They did hold Travis Kelce, down a little bit comparatively to what Kelce can do last week, but he still found the end zone. And this Eagles pass defense just hasn't been great in general. Dalton Kincaid needs to be in your lineup unless you have Travis Kelce. That is the only one that I would consider starting ahead of Dalton Kincaid at this moment. Now, I have these 2 Thursday Night Football. I wanted to give them to you last, just in case you're watching this on a Friday, you're watching this on Saturday, Sunday, because then you could be done, you could move on because you've already seen these games. But if you're watching this on Wednesday or you're watching this early on Thursday, these 2 are for you. First one is David Montgomery. And I know, Jahmyr Gibbs, more carries inside the 5 than Monty has had. Well, Monty still has 2 touchdowns in his last 2 games since returning for injury. And let's be honest, do we really think the Lions aren't going to have multiple red zone, multiple goal line trips against the Packers at home this week? Yeah, they're going to be there a lot. So even if Gibbs scores 3 touchdowns in the red zone, I still think Monty's going to have plenty of opportunities to punch one in. The Packers are allowing the 15th most yards to running backs over the last 4 weeks, 90 yards a game. And the Packers have been pretty stingy against the pass as of late. Jair Alexander coming back, their defense being a little bit better. And I know Gibbs is really getting into that role, and that's something that we predicted. But we also said at the beginning of the year they can both be productive. And Monty's averaging 9.6 and 6.3 yards per carry since returning. So the efficiency's there. He doesn't need 30 carries to be great, with Gibbs also spelling him a little bit. So I think Monty's still a great start. 17 points in each of the last 2 games. I don't see why he couldn't do that again against the Packers this week. And finally, we have Dak Prescott, who, slowed down a little bit for the first time last week. His first game outside the top 3 quarterback finish in his last 5. But Dak, to me, this week is the quarterback 2 behind Josh Allen. And Josh Allen alone. The Commanders are giving up the 5th most points quarterbacks over the last 4 games. And Dak's had 4 straight multi-touchdown games. And until last game, he had at least 275 yards in each game. I think that the Commanders stick around enough to keep this game competitive. And I think Dak just has another fantastic game where he's putting up tons of yards. He's putting up touchdowns. And we see, a great fantasy performance from him and probably CeeDee Lamb as well. Well, guys, that wraps up our must-starts for Week 12. Enjoy your holiday weekend with some football, with some food, with family. Let's go win those championships. We're 3 weeks away from the playoffs. This is when starts really matter. This is when you need to make those last little lineup tweaks. So, guys, let's go win some championships. Enjoy your holidays, and we will see you next week. Deuces.